Hello, welcome to AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. I'm your host, John S. Trying a little electro swing today. I hope you like it. In this episode, Ben and I discuss Step 12, how we changed, why we changed, and what we do to help others, with a few other topics thrown in for good measure. I hope you enjoy this episode of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. Hey, Ben.
Hey, John. It's good to talk with you. It's been a while.
Yes, it has. I took a much-needed break. I had a lot going on at work and just needed to kind of focus on things there for a little while, getting them squared away.
Yeah, that self-care is important.
It is. I've missed these podcasts, though, and I've also missed my regular meetings. So I've been a little bit out of sorts, but okay. I'm looking forward to this. I mean, Step 12. The first thing I'm going to say, just kind of going into it with you, Ben, is I'm definitely not a dogmatic person. I'm definitely not a ideological person when it comes to 12-step recovery. I don't see these steps as something I have to follow religiously and do just right, and I don't think it's so important to analyze them and understand them. I just see them as just a way of our sharing our experience with each other. This is how the first people shared their experience with us, is through these steps. That's it. And that's what we do. And I'm very different from a lot of people in AA, and even within our own community of agnostics, atheists, and free thinkers. First of all, it says in the step, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, I can't believe I can't remember the steps. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Well, first of all, I don't believe in spirituality. I don't say I don't believe in it. It's not a thing for me. It's not, I'm okay with people having a spiritual experience or expressing their recovery in spiritual terms. But when they do, I have to interpret that for myself. So if someone says that they've had a spiritual experience, I'm often thinking they've had an emotional experience or a psychological experience. They've had something that they feel inside of them on an emotional, mental level. Because for me, there's no such thing as a spiritual level. I believe in only physical things. So that's the approach I take now. I wasn't always that way, but that's the approach I take. So when they say having had a spiritual awakening, the way that I word the step for myself is, having changed, I help others.
Yeah.
And that change could be as a result of some external force. It could be a result of my own hard work. And I think in my case, it was a combination of both. And that attitude of being helpful to others doesn't just limit myself to being helpful to people in AA or people who are having drinking problems, but it's an attitude I try to carry with me through society as a whole to help where I can. And one thing I have learned in AA that I do value is that the greatest thing that I can share with anybody, whether it be in AA or the workplace or whatever, is my experience. And through sharing my experience, it's an easier way for people to accept, because I'm not preaching to them. I'm not telling them what they must do, or I'm just telling them, hey, this is what happened with me.
Yeah, it's like when you just share your experience, you're just asking them to engage in their own experience. I liked what you said, too. The people who first got together, I mean, I know this branched off the Oxford group, but they didn't all have the exact same experience. They talked about their experiences. They found what they had in common, and they recorded some of it. I mean, I think the book was, necessarily meant to be sold. So it makes it sound like there was a uniform, consensus. But we know, reading AA history, that certainly was not true.
Right.
But, and I'm with you. I'm not a big fan of the word spiritual, and I do the same kind of translating. I do like, I can get behind the idea of an awakening. It's like, I think about how depressed I was while I was still drinking. And, I'd had different awakenings during my drinking times too. It's like just a moment where you learn something about the world or about yourself, and you're changed because of it. I think the 12 by 12 even says it's a new state of consciousness or being. I can get behind that. But yeah, in terms of spiritual and God's reached down and touched me and this and that, that's not my belief. But
I can understand how people, if you have a religious background, might feel that. Even if you don't have a religious background, if you have some kind of, I can understand how you want to express it that way, because the difference between being an alcoholic and a sober alcoholic is so stark. I mean, it's so amazing that when you go through that experience where one day you realize, wow, I can read the Sunday newspaper, you know, I can buy supper, or I can hold my food down, or I can sign a check without shaking, or I mean, it's like going from a black and white movie to a color movie, like The Wizard of Oz, I guess. It's truly a different thing. So I can understand why people would want to express it like, wow, this is something beyond just, this is outside of the human experience. This is something I can't really explain because I've never experienced this before.
Right.
And that's how they choose to describe it.
Yeah, it is. And I think there's peer pressure in AA to describe things the way it's described in our book and things like that. And it's just not necessarily true for everyone, I don't think. Since I've been more honest about different things like struggling with depression or having periods of sobriety where I wasn't overly content, and it wasn't because I wasn't doing the steps and I wasn't doing what was asked of me. It was just a period of time where I'd had some mental health issues or just down periods of time, and that's okay and normal. But the more I've talked about that and been open and honest about that, the more people I've had come up to me and talk about the same thing. So there can be, as we read through the grandiosity of our literature, there can be a left out feeling that I feel sometimes, and other people have told me too, that if you're not experiencing it exactly that way, well, then you must be doing it wrong. Or, we ignore mental health. We didn't know a lot about mental health before. There's a lot more to having a healthy life if you want there to be. I mean, a lot of people receive help in therapy. A lot of people need pharmaceutical help. I know that's controversial even in our community, but there's more to this happiness than just living this dogmatic way that's prescribed in the books. That's been my experience, at least. There are people who, do everything in this book and perfectly, I guess, right. And experience that all the time. They claim to, but right. I don't find that very honest when I hear it. I mean, it strikes me as not honest when I hear it in a meeting, and it's not necessarily because I'm out to break down somebody's character or see when they're lying, but sometimes it feels like a lot of posturing. Sometimes we can tell what feels genuine to us or not, and often that stuff doesn't always feel that genuine to me.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Sometimes it's because I've known what that person's been going through that they'll share with me personally, know?
No, I was like that. I mean, I was, I've talked about this before, and a lot of it was just me, this is just how I behaved in this new group setting that I found myself in when I was starting out with AA. I learned to conform to the social norms of the group. I learned to say the things that the group was saying, that the majority of the people said. So, and the particular group that I went to, they studied this big book, and they thought that the big book was our recovery, and it was important to know. So, I studied the big book like the rest of the group did. And when I talked in meetings, I would share from the big book more than from my own personal experience, probably. But that's okay. I mean, I was doing good because, I might have thought that it was understanding the book and somehow replicating this experience from 1935 or 1939 or whatever was keeping me sober.
Right.
But there was probably a lot of other things going on. A lot of other dynamics were taking place in those meetings and after the meeting that was really doing it for me. The human connection and all of that, as we've talked about. Not to denigrate the steps. And not to put down the idea that, it's great having recognized that I've changed. I've changed. However, maybe I've changed. There's a lot of ways I've changed. I've changed because I've gotten older and I've learned a lot just from living.
Right.
I've changed because of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've changed because of my experience as an active alcoholic and not drinking and sharing that with others. In all kinds of ways I've changed. People, friends, psychologists, psychiatrists. So, but I have changed.
For sure. I mean, none of us would be involved in this if we hadn't changed. And I guess part of step 12 is hoping to help other people change. It used to be for me, I read in the book a lot of time, they'll say, we carry AA's message. We carry AA's message. Well, I don't know if I carry AA's message. And I've gotten hollered at recently by a dogmatist about that. And it's all I have is my own experience. We've got all these quotes from Bill Wilson through the years that say you can meet these steps where they're at. You can take them or leave them, basically. So really all I have is my experience. And if I had to boil down AA's message at all, it's just that it's possible to live a pretty contented, happy life. Well, it's just possible to not drink and move forward, I guess.
Right. That's something that's a bit of a, I guess you might call it a dichotomy. I don't know. But like in the big book, it says that there's a solution that we absolutely all agree upon. I don't think any time in the history of Alcoholics Anonymous have we ever agreed on any one solution. If there's anything that we agree on, it's that we recognize we have a problem and we have a common problem. So that gives us the ability to help each other,
Yep.
So in a way, step 12 is probably, the bedrock of AA in that it's the fact that, we have a unique ability to help someone who is having a drinking problem or drug problem for that matter and has bottomed out in their life because we've had the experience and they can and because of that they can trust us. We speak to each other on a level playing field from our own experience. I mean, that's what did it for me. I mean, coming into the rooms of AA as a young person who was looking at some, having some serious legal issues and stuff, I was so ashamed of myself. I wouldn't want anyone I went to high school to know what I was dealing with or the people I went to college with or my family for that matter. I didn't want anyone to know what was going on. I had that kind of shame. But when I came into AA, I met people that looked like really decent people who had the same experiences. And it just made all the difference in the world. Had I gone to if there hadn't been an AA and I just went to a doctor or, somebody who has it all together and is real authoritative and is speaking to me from books he's studied and everything like that, I would respect all that knowledge, but it doesn't reach me the same way as a human being who's had the experience that I've had. And it's important to be able to have people you can trust and go and talk to about things because it's a really, when you first stop drinking, it's a really tough period for a lot of different reasons, physically, emotionally. And it's really great to have a network of people that you can share notes with and kind of help you through that period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, you said that. That's just what it is and what it's good for. And that's probably why I'm so anti-posturing and anti-dogma, because I feel like it somewhere in there, the genuineness gets lost, and it's harder for people who might be new to connect with that raw honesty about what's really going on. So that's I think that's where my concern comes from on that.
Yeah.
And it's, as I read through even the book, the working with others chapter, it's amazing how much is on, step 12 in both books of literature. But it's like, I called it in other podcasts, it's like sobriety vampires. It's like, I've got to go help someone so I can stay sober, and if they're not jumping on, then don't hesitate to drop them. It's like, there's some really, really good advice in there about don't try and force sobriety on anyone who's not really ready. That's good, but it's almost like the tone it takes. It's very, very cult-like this time reading through, where it's like going out and being evangelical about AA and roping people up, and it's
that's
very Dale Carnegie-like.
It's very. I wonder if it's because of them coming from the Oxford group, where I guess that was sort of an evangelical movement, and I wonder if they were trying to replicate first century Christianity. So I guess, and I'm not a historian on Christianity, but I assume that the Christians were trying to get their message out there, right, and convert people.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe that's
for sure.
maybe that's what they were. That's their background. In a way, it served us well because, the AA grew phenomenally and still is because of that. People felt this need to share their experience. But you're also right. There's got to be some balance because it can be a little bit off-putting, to be evangelical about anything,
And the book warns us of that too. It's interesting. It kind of goes back and forth.
You're right about that. It does. They really did try hard with the big book to be balanced, I think, to a certain extent. But Yeah, you're right. They did say that. I found that balance. I don't feel a need to go out and change anybody. I don't feel a need to. I you know I don't go out of my way to insist that I guess somebody believe a certain way or anything. I don't really care. I just for me, I care about people that are experiencing this problem because I've experienced and I know how it feels, and I just want to be there to. It makes me feel better, and it's very fulfilling for me to watch them get better. And I don't think I really have that big of a role in it. I might have done some things that laid some groundwork for them, maybe, but at least I'm there to experience that, and that's what I like to see. Even in the workplace, to be honest with you, I've been talking about before the podcast. I enjoy watching the employees at work develop. I enjoy watching their progress, and I get the same thing in AA. I enjoy going to meetings and watching people, start at the bottom and kind of rebuild their lives. And if I can help them in any way, it's only through saying, this is what happened with me or whatever. So, but
it's my nephew says a lot in meetings, and forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but he'll say, I'm not here to help anybody but myself. And then everybody, of course, like, kind of like, sounds very selfish. But then he goes on to talk about how if I just am in AA to help everybody else, that's not always healthy. So the way I've found that I help people the best is just by coming to a meeting and being authentic and genuine to who I am, and then it has a chance to resonate with somebody else. Now, it doesn't mean if somebody asks me to help them, I'm not going to help them. And it doesn't mean that that's not part of why I'm there. But what he means is if I'm just out there searching and trying to grab people to help, it doesn't tend to last for whoever receives that help. Like if we just come and engage and be open and vulnerable around other people, it tends to encourage that in other people. Yeah. I think that's his point. We've talked about that many times, but people really bristle at that right when he first says it. And it doesn't mean screw all you. I'm not here to help anybody but myself. It's not that kind of selfishness. It's just, and that's what I like about AA. It's when it's good, when I find it's good, I shouldn't say, because everybody finds it differently. But when it's, my old home group, if somebody's there for their first time, we immediately have a step one meeting, which is okay, I think. But then all the attention gets turned to that new person, and people will talk directly at that person. Yeah. It's like, that's the opposite of what needs to happen in my book. It's like, that's the last thing you want the first meeting you walk into.
That's so interesting. But did you know that at our group here in Kansas City, we voted to stop doing the first step meetings for people?
I don't blame you.
We did. And it's so interesting. And we had a discussion about it at our last business meeting, where now we're going to leave it at the chairperson's discretion. But this is what we found. We get a lot of newcomers at our group, and they come, and then we give them a first step meeting where we share our stories to them and everything. And by the way, that's not universal in AA. It seems to be in the Midwest for sure. We do that, but I don't think that they do that. They don't do it in Canada. When I was talking to Roger, he said, "What are you talking about?" No.
Right.
So anyway, we decided, like you just said, it's like, wow, I mean, we're just making these people feel uncomfortable. We're talking to them. They're the center of attention. We get a little bit long-winded with our stories. It's not really a good example of what the typical AA meeting is. And we thought, no, what we should do is recognize we got somebody new there, but just create an atmosphere where that person feels safe and welcome. And then we just go on and have our regular AA meeting, and then just let them kind of have that experience. And I found that works better than going around the room and sharing your drunk-a-log with the person. So, it's interesting that you said that, because we had that experience at our group, and we're probably the only group I know of in Kansas City, I bet you, that decided not to do first step meetings. And when I tell people that we did that, they think, oh, that's so, they're shocked by it, because they're thinking, well, don't you want to help people? Well, we think that the way that we are helping people is by not putting them on the spot. Right. Just making them feel welcome. That's the best way that we have of helping people. So it's interesting you mentioned that.
Well, I'm sure it's different for everyone, but, the first couple times I went to a meeting, the court asked me to go once a week, and, I kind of sat on the outskirts, and it took me a while to feel comfortable there. And if somebody would have just came right out and, hey, get in here, it's like, I probably would have been like, fuck this, I'm out of here, I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
I needed, like you said, a place to feel comfortable and slowly dip my toe in. And then, after a while I did feel comfortable and I heard things that resonated with me that made me feel like I might be in the right place.
So anyway, we did that, and then now we're deciding to let people. Some people think that it's important still to do it, so we're just leaving it at chairperson's discretion to decide what they do. Because I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think it's better not to have to do that first step meeting for people. But yeah, I had that traditional experience where people went around the room and shared their story, and it was kind of helpful for me to hear that. But they I didn't necessarily feel like I was on the spot at that meeting. I really felt very safe and comfortable for whatever reason. But some of the meetings I've been to, I've heard some crazy stuff happen. You can't really control what's said sometimes,
Well, and it's there's a way to have a step one story without it turning into drunkalogs. But there's definitely, when you do focus on step one, there's some people that's the only thing they're comfortable sharing, it seems like. So that's all you ever hear from them in a meeting. So it takes that out of play, I guess. But, there's a way to truncate that. I think step one meetings can be good, where we talk about realizing when we had a problem and how we felt and things like that without going into every little detail. But
so when you do it in Nebraska, like you do the meeting, you all go around, share your story. Do you bypass the person there and then give him an opportunity or her an opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting?
Well, this meeting that was my home group was pretty, I don't know, it wasn't very structured. Okay. So there wasn't really a set way to do it. Somebody would just kind of share a little bit about their own story of realizing they had a problem. But so many people at that meeting tended to just like, if the person was sitting on the outskirts of the meeting, they would turn their chair around and just stare at the person and tell them what they had to do.
Yeah.
And yet you could just see on a lot of those people's faces, there's like, oh man, get me out of here. So
yeah, I remember my old home group. I used to particularly hate it when someone would start talking God to the person.
Yeah.
I didn't have that experience at my first meeting. Nobody was telling me to get on my knees at my first meeting. If they had said that, I think that would have really creeped me out, to be quite honest with you. Now, I did start hearing that, though, later on. But maybe I heard it at my first meeting, but I just ignored it. I don't know. But when I hear it now at meetings, I don't hear it anymore because I only go to agnostic meetings. But when I hear that, it does creep me out.
Kind of a cool experience to give some kudos to an old timer. The other night I went, a friend of mine, he's an older man. He just had some physical things go on. He broke his leg and he's been in like a physical rehab facility, and they had a 16-year celebration for him there the other night. And him and I have always been kind of friends, and he asked me to give him his chip. And so I was like, oh, wow, I'm not going to miss that, So I went down there and I saw a lot of people I hadn't seen for a while because I'm not going to as many meetings lately. And this other old timer that was there said, Ben, I talked about you in a meeting the other day. And I was like, oh, really? What'd you say? I hope it was good or something like that, joking. And he said, well, somebody just said you have to have a higher power or you can't make it in AA. And he said, no, we all know our friend Ben in here. He's very verbal about the fact he doesn't believe in God, and he seems like a pretty decent guy, and he's doing all right. You don't have to do anything here.
No, you don't.
So it made me feel really good that he said that, and I thanked him for it. But
it's interesting you mentioned that thing about having to have a higher power, because I haven't been on Facebook very much, just on and off lately, but I saw a post that you actually posted on a young woman. She seemed like a young woman, but this is from my perspective, I guess. Yeah. But she was talking about her frustration with AA and people insisting that she make up some sort of a higher power, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said something to her or whatever that made her feel better. Like, it's like, you don't have to make up you don't have to do anything. Mm-hmm. If you're not comfortable having a higher power, and that term is kind of a strange. It's not a term that we normally use. We use it in AA, but in the general world, you don't.
Right.
But yeah, it seems kind of weird. I don't need a higher power. Let people do whatever they want to do. If people, they don't have to make anything up. Who cares?
Right.
Do whatever they want to do. I think, I would say to someone, I guess, if they said, I'm really struggling. I don't believe I need to have a higher power. I think that I'm responsible for my own recovery. I'd say, I agree with you. I agree with you. It's been my experience more or less too.
Mm-hmm.
I do like going to AA. I think that's helpful. Check that out and some other options,
Yeah. Well, and like we've talked about, it's to me the thing that works behind a higher power, even if you believe in one, is the act of just getting out of yourself.
Yeah.
But not everybody needs an object to turn that over to get out of yourself and think about others more. So.
No. We need to stop focusing on what we believe and start focusing on what we do. And a higher power is nothing more than a belief. A higher power is like, I believe that that I'm doing these things. I'm empowered by this, whatever, the group or God or whatever, to do these things. That's where I'm getting my power from, they believe. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, whatever. That's a belief. Who cares? Just do what you got to do, right? Go to meetings. Don't drink. Go to meetings. Help others. If you want to do an inventory, do an inventory. If you want to, make amends, make amends. You've got this whole history of experience in AA that goes back, 80 years now, that you can draw upon. You've got your home group. You've got all these other groups. If you're in a large city like I am, you've got all kinds of groups you can go to. Yeah. So draw upon that experience,
Well, then I would tell that person, please share with me what's working for you, because I'm tired of hearing the same old bullshit. It's like that peer pressure to say the right thing in AA. It's like the meetings that feel fresh is where you can tell somebody's genuinely doing the work that they're finding works for them, and then share it with us, because maybe I need to hear what you have to say, and I need another little, piece of what I can take from what you're sharing that I hadn't thought of before. Otherwise, it's just people parroting everything back and forth to each other.
Yeah, I agree with you on that too. And that contradicts some of the, are these back to basics people that say this, that you should take the cotton out of your ears or whatever, put the cotton in your ear,
put it in your mouth.
Yeah. In other words, they're saying just shut up and listen until you know what you're talking about. Well, that's ridiculous. I found that the times I really needed to talk when I was really struggling, And so I'm like just the opposite. I say, no, you go to meetings and you share as you're comfortable to share in meetings, don't sit there and feel like you have to listen and be put in your place. I think that's the worst advice you can give a newcomer is to not speak.
Yeah. Well, it's what those people are saying to those person. The translation is, shut up. I want to talk now and tell you how to do it.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
And for some people, that's all AA feels like to them. It's like, I want to go somewhere and talk down to somebody and tell them exactly what I do, because surely they want to be exactly like me.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, nobody wants to be like you.
Yeah. It's so wrong. It's the exact opposite of what you want to do. Because I know when I was going to outside of AA, what if I had to go to like a treatment program, or mine wasn't a typical treatment program, but what I went to was like a outpatient thing where the courts made me go. If I went to that, I didn't have anybody that I was like basically learning. I mean, they were teaching me things there. Or if I went to drunk driving school in particular, they were teaching me, they were talking to me, teaching me. We don't really teach in AA. We don't instruct. We just share our experience and we listen to the experience of others. And that listening is very important. I get a lot from the newcomer. I got to hear them talk. How else am I going to experience the joy of their recovery if I don't let them share it, if I don't get to listen to their stories?
Oh, yeah. And it's that authenticity that people have when they're first coming in. I think that I miss when meetings are just full of old timers who've got their lines down that they tend to say, like, oh, I've just heard the topic is going to be gratitude. Click track 8 in my head, and here it comes. Same thing every time.
Yep.
And it's nice to hear fresh things from a newcomer. It is because they're coming at it with a fresh perspective. I mean, I would say they haven't been brainwashed yet by the groupthink that goes on in AA, which. My favorite meetings are the ones where it feels like it has just a slice of like small group therapy to it. Like not that people are talking back and forth to each other, but just that it's a little bit more revealing. I've got a friend here named Marcy, and she said it once in a meeting, and I'm sure she borrowed it from somewhere else, but she said, we're like tuning forks. It's like one of us is a little bit off tune and the other people come in, you come into the meeting and it just helps you get back in tune. Like when I'm in a good place and maybe John, you're in a bad place, what I have to share that day helps you get back in tune with where you need to be. And then the next time I might not be that great, and you help me get back in tune.
Right.
So that's to me what it feels like. But if it's just teach and preach session, it's like, oh man, it's like, that's why, people who don't know anything about AA will say, oh, are you going to those AA classes still? It's like, they aren't classes. It's people think AA is more professional than it is on the outside, I think, too.
Yeah.
They think like there's facilitators that know how to lead it, and it's some kind of organization. But
yeah, that's actually kind of the impression that I had when, before I came to my very first meeting, I didn't really know what to expect, but I was expecting some sort of an interview intake process where they decide whether or not I'm a candidate for the program or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, unfortunately not that way.
I was reading through, too, in the big book, the 12, working with others, but here's where some of the first stuff about real alcoholic comes into. Like it was saying, if you are satisfied he's a real alcoholic, then you can go forward with this process with, the person you're trying to evangelize to. But then later it says, if someone thinks they can do it on their own and they can, then they must not be too alcoholic. It's in saying not too much of an alcoholic. So those two things kind of contradict each other a little bit, but
and also that's where we have definitely an ideological battle within Alcoholics Anonymous, where you have these certain dogmatic people who will say, well, if you don't have God, then you must not be a real alcoholic. And I think they draw from this in the book, but it wasn't really intended to be interpreted like that. There's a huge danger with looking at the stupid. I would call it a stupid book. It's a good book and everything. It's a book. It's all, and it's an old book and it's literature, and you can understand this in the context of its time and understand that a lot has been learned from then. But what I was hearing in meetings when I was a newcomer, this was important to me because I was very young. I was 25 years old when I was first starting out. And people were saying things like, you're not just a little bit of an alcoholic. It's like being a little bit pregnant. It's like, once you have lost control of your drinking, it's unlikely to get any better. So, this thing is on a continuum. Alcoholism is a progressive thing. And so it helped me understand that. And it helped me so much. I didn't have to worry about, I didn't go down to the depths of this guy who, had DTs and, lost his everything in the world. I did lose everything in the world, but I didn't have a lot to begin with, but so I needed to hear that. And I think that's the best message that we have is that if you have a desire to stop drinking, you belong here. And, alcoholism, like any disease, like any pathology, I guess, or anything in the universe changes, So, I mean, if you've lost control of your drinking and you continue drinking out of control, it's almost certainly a guarantee that things are just going to get worse.
Right.
If you continue drinking.
Physically, that tends to be the truth.
Yeah, it's just the truth. I mean, physically, your liver is gonna get shot. You're gonna die from it if you've lost control of your drinking, and you continue on. I mean, it's just gonna get worse. But that being said, once you stop drinking, okay, then you've arrested that problem, and that's great. But I don't think that you have to be trapped into any one philosophy or anything of how you go about not drinking. I just happened to found a way that I have fallen into with AA where, I don't drink one day at a time and I go to meetings. And now for me, the steps are just kind of, auxiliary things, they're just part of everything. But, everybody has their own experience with it.
And for sure. And just as all the things in the steps were borrowed from somewhere else, it's like now that I'm returning outside of AA to see how, to do this thing in the world, I have different ways of describing it than it's said in the book. Well, this stuff in the book was borrowed from other places. So really, I'm kind of returning to the source of it anyhow, if I'm using things outside of AA.
Yeah.
That didn't quite make sense the way I hoped it would, but it's like, it's not exclusively AA. I'm so tempted when the old timer I don't care for the most in my home group always says, well, you're either going to jails, institutions, death, or you're going to make it in AA. Well, I want to say those aren't the only options.
No.
You can make it in smart recovery if you don't like it here. I just would hate to give a newcomer the idea that if AA doesn't work for you, well, you're going to die.
Right. I do too. there's a million different ways probably to approach recovery. Some people just stop on their own, and they are real alcoholics. They stop on their own. It happens. In fact, I think scientifically they've shown that that spontaneous recovery is a pretty high percentage. I just read a few articles. And that's probably controversial, but so yeah, there's a certain percentage that just recover on their own. There's people that just through their churches. There are people through AA. There are people through different recovery programs. Whatever. There's all kinds of different ways. This just happens to be what I found.
Yeah. And just as I know many people who left AA because they were tired of the God stuff, I know quite a few people who left AA because they couldn't talk about Jesus all the time and they felt like they, there really are. I know 5 to 10 people that I've known throughout my 10 years in AA who said, I can't stand that I can't talk about Jesus more here. And, quite a few of those people relapsed actually, but I don't know. AA does not have to be as narrow as it is about all this stuff. I want to give kudos, though, to the book, too. There's some things it brings up about helping people that are good, too. It talks about needing to get to know everything about the person you can get to know about them so that you can help them best. That's good, I think. It warns us about helping people with money too much and things like that, too, which is good. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk about the benefit of it's not as much lately because I don't do quite as much active sponsoring as I used to. I still do. Mm-hmm. But there was a period of time in my sobriety earlier in AA, I would say probably from when I was 2 years sober to maybe 5 years sober, where I'm not saying I wanted to drink and I didn't, but if I hadn't been sponsoring people at that time, it probably would have been a lot easier for me to fade away from AA and possibly drink. Yeah, I think just knowing that I needed to be accountable because I had other people I was helping probably helped me. It did help me stay sober. Now, again, I really don't like the tone of the book at the times where it says we need to help other people to help ourselves stay sober. That seems really selfish to me.
Yeah.
Like when and when people say, well, they didn't stay sober, but you stayed sober. I get their point. But again, I don't want to be a sobriety vampire who wants to run around helping people. Because it's what I need to do to stay sober.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Help people because it's from out of my heart, because I've realized things about myself. I have processed how difficult it is early in sobriety, and I know that it helps to have a helping hand there. Right. I want to help people. But for people who maybe lie along more of a codependent spectrum, Step 12 can be really dangerous, I think, too. Mm-hmm. Like, it can be easy to forget yourself, forget your family. There was a particular passage in here that really made me cringe when it came to, let's see, it's on page 97. It said, never avoid these responsibilities, but be sure you are doing the right thing if you assume them.
Right.
Helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. Mm-hmm. A kindly act once in a while isn't enough. Mm-hmm. You have to act the Good Samaritan every day if need be. It may mean the loss of many nights' sleep, great interference with your pleasures, interruptions to your business. It may mean sharing your money and your home, counseling frantic wives and relatives, innumerable trips to police courts, sanitariums, hospitals, jails, and asylums. Your telephone may jangle at any time of the day or night. Your wife may sometimes say she is neglected. A drunk may smash the furniture in your home or burn a mattress. You may have to fight with him if he is violent. Sometimes you will have to call a doctor and administer sedatives under his direction. Another time you may have to send for the police or an ambulance. Occasionally you will have to meet such conditions.
Yeah.
So it's like some of that's saying you're going to have to go to a lot of lengths. You may have to ignore your family a little bit. And to me, that's not practicing the principles of recovery. The first place this thing starts is in my personal life. I need to treat others. And this is part of the 12 step I do love. It's like practicing these principles in all our affairs. It's where can I add to a situation rather than take away? Like if I'm dealing with a customer service situation where I go in somewhere to, for lack of a better word, complain. How am I going to, be respectful to this person while still hoping to achieve the result I achieve with? So don't just go in there and be an asshole.
Right.
How can I, if I'm in a fast food line and it's taking a long time, do I treat the employee who's barely making any money and being taken advantage of like shit just because I'm frustrated? No. I mean, those are the little things that I've gotten from recovery that are the most helpful. It's like, how can I be more understanding and compassionate to other people? how can I be of service to people? Hold a door for somebody, even,
Right.
That's stuff I did before, really. But I mean, it's just getting out of yourself, helping others, and not with the idea of, boy, they're going to ask me what I do. And then I can tell I'm a recovering alcoholic. And I've been how many times have I heard people say that in meetings?
No, I agree with all of that. I think that, there's a lot of different ways to help people. And, I do it not necessarily, I don't do it because I think I have to do it or I'm going to drink. I do it because I genuinely love it. I love to connect with other people, and I enjoy that. Now, that's really interesting, that paragraph you read. There's a lot of different ways that we can help people. And I've experienced a lot of that stuff in that paragraph, but I don't think that that's necessary that we all have to experience that. We all have our own, responsibilities in life. We're all at an individual place to help in different ways. Like I knew a man many years ago, a nice man who's been sober for a long time. And one thing that he used to do is he had like a basement where he outfitted it where he would, if people didn't have a place to stay, he would give people a place to stay or whatever. That was nice. That was something he chose to do. Not very many people ever do anything like that. The group that I went to in my early days, they were very much, and maybe other AA groups were like this too, they were very much into the old-fashioned 12-step call. And I'd been on a number of those. I talked about it in a podcast that I did when I was speaking at the Paseo group. I was kind of recounting some experiences of 12-step calls that I'd gone on. But it would always happen where we actually had a telephone in our home group, and we'd get a call. Maybe it came from central office or maybe someone in the neighborhood or whatever. And it was somebody that needed a visit. So we would actually go to the person's house or apartment, and we would sit down and share our stories and try to talk about AA a little bit to that person. And it was just, that kind of experience. So I had a lot of those experiences. And I've also had the experiences of having to take people to emergency rooms. I've seen people go through, what is it? You go through like convulsions, I've had that.
Oh yeah. Seizures.
I've had all kinds of experiences, with people. Not everybody does, but that I was at a place in my life though, Ben, where I was young and, I don't know, I was single and it was just, I guess, okay for me to do that, but it's not for everyone, and that's okay. I don't even know if that happens that much anymore, if people really do those 12-step calls like they used to, but I used to go on a lot of those.
Yeah, I can honestly say I've only been on one ever, but, I worked at a detox center too. So, it's at the end of those 12-step calls often. It doesn't happen as often, and things have changed since the book was written about how we handle detox. Thankfully, I mean, there's
and
also
most people come to us other than us going to them,
right?
And a lot of people find about AA online or something like that, and maybe they even go to some online meeting or something. There's probably more of that going on than I even realized, but But one thing about that, if you do go on a 12-step call and you're talking to someone. When I was kind of first doing it, and this happened many, many years, I somehow expected things to play out just as described in the book, that as long as I did all this stuff and shared my experience with them, that they were going to rise out of their beds and they were going to take my advice and go to meetings and stuff. Well, that doesn't always work out that way. In fact, most of the time, you would never see the person again. And they might, I don't know what would happen to them, but, the experience for me was good. So that's why I would do it. But anyway, there are a lot of different ways you can help people. You can, one thing that another thing that I've done that I enjoy doing, which might not be for everybody, is at our central office when they, close at the end of the day, there's someone in the AA community here in Kansas City that has the cell phone for the central office, and you're basically on call, for all the time that the central office is closed. So, you get these phone calls from people at all hours, it's like, you don't get a tremendous number of them. You get enough to keep you pretty busy, but that was a very rewarding way. So for a week, I'll carry the central office cell phone, so that after hours I can, answer the phone and tell people where there's a meeting or maybe someone just wants to talk to somebody. And so that was a good way of doing it. You can just help out at your home group by cleaning up. You can, just go to meetings and be with people. There's all kinds of ways you can go speak at other groups. Recently I found, and again, this isn't for everybody, but I really enjoy getting involved with the service structure of AA. And I go to, my district meetings and area assemblies and stuff like that. And, I hated all that kind of crap for a long time, but I love it now, because it's a way for me to be of service. Something I'm wanting to do now for our area. They elected me, like the alternative chair person of the archives.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So I have a job. And, one thing that we're trying to do there, we're trying to record stories of, old timers in the western area of Missouri. So like I guess an old timer is someone with 30 years or more sobriety. And so we record them for the archives. And I thought, well, that'd be just great for me because I have all this recording equipment for podcasts. So I want to do that. I want to go to all the different groups and see if I can find old timers who will tell me their story, and I'll just sit and record them. And that's a great way for me to be of service because I'm doing something I enjoy. I love history. I love AA, and I like hearing people's stories. I love recording their stories. That's something I've learned I enjoy from doing these podcasts because it's like when I listen to someone's story on this podcast and I go through the editing process and everything, I never forget their story. All these stories are in my brain, and I've gotten so much out of it. I just love it. So I'm really looking forward to extending that to just the broader community here in Missouri because I want to hear experience beyond just the non-believers. And I want to get all of that stuff recorded. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm kind of talking about myself too much, but there's all kinds of ways you can get involved in AA if you want to. You don't have to do anything at all. I'm like you. I reject the idea that you've got to do this to stay sober. But you know what? Most people do like helping other people, I think. And so there's a lot of ways of doing it here.
Yeah, definitely. I enjoyed. I haven't gotten involved in the political side of AA as much or the service structure as you have, but I like living vicariously through you. But I'll volunteer for setup committees and things like that, and always offer. There's one time I had a friend who was involved in, my old group used to set up a hospitality thing at one of the spring flings or whatever, and like I bought a bunch of pizzas, and that was my contribution. But then I had this other friend a few months ago. He told me that he offered to donate several cases of soda for his group's thing like that, and everybody had a huge meeting about it and said that they didn't think they could allow him to do that because it might be an ego thing. That it was just like, good God, like, do we really have to micromanage this that much? Like, so they said, no, we'll buy it all with our money from the meeting. And, I get what they're trying to say. They don't want to send a press, whatever, and he could maybe feel ill about it. But it's like, good Lord. Yeah. Like, we don't have to, I don't know. Anyhow, I don't have the patience for that, I don't think. So I'm glad that you are willing to get into the service. I should say I don't have the patience for it at this time. The times I have gotten involved, I felt like there was a lot of arguing and debates about issues that were non-issues that probably would never be issues. It was like planning for a future that would never exist, like building a wall. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. But it's just, I don't know.
No,
like
you
said, there are lots of ways to do this. There's lots of ways to help out, and some of us do different things better than others. So it's
and where you're at in your life too. It's like, where you're at in your life right now, you've got a newborn, so your time is pretty limited. You can't be having drunks in your house smashing the furniture and stuff like that.
Yeah, no one but me, at least. No, I'm just kidding. But it's interesting. Like, I saw a lot of people on Thursday when I went for that guy's chip presentation that I hadn't seen in a while, and like people ask you that question, where you been? How you been? And it's like, just because I'm not going to your meeting anymore doesn't mean I'm not going to other meetings.
Right.
And then I'll have people who say like, you still sober? And I'm like, yeah, I haven't seen you either. Are you still sober? Like, it's just because they haven't seen me. They wonder if I am. And they kind of give you an extra long look in the eyes, like to see if you're being honest, or I don't know. It's weird.
I should write a book about AA etiquette. And one of the
Yes.
things I should say, it's bad form to ask somebody if they're still sober.
Yeah. The first question that you ask them when you see them.
Yeah.
Not how are you? Good to see you. Just where have you been?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny, and this guy has, knee problems and stuff, and he always has a big barbecue in the summer at his house. And of course, like 4 or 5 alcoholics asked him, "Oh, you still having the barbecue this summer?" It's like, of course, it's all about you, right? You're gonna have the barbecue.
Right.
I want you to have your barbecue, not how you feeling, how's your leg doing. It's good, Lord. Anyhow, though, I mean, I do think it's, like I said, there's periods of times where being an active sponsor, and I still am, has probably helped keep me sober for sure. So I don't want to demean that.
No.
But as far as, there are different times when I sponsored people before that it was, I think I probably did try and control them on some level without really overtly thinking I was doing so.
And Ben, that's the whole thing. Like you said, it's where you're at in your life. And it's where it's whatever is working for a person. Because like I don't want to be so dogmatic myself, saying, "Oh, the big book is bullshit, and you don't need to be studying the big book." And I don't want to be like that, because I did those things because that's the person I was at that time, and it was helpful. Right. So if I meet someone today who's like, I have to understand this, because I meet people like this who drive me crazy, but I'm just looking at myself in the mirror, basically. These people who think, "Oh, this big book you've got to study this big book. You got to know this big," that kind of shit drives me crazy now. But I was kind of like that at one time. So I have to say, hey, wait a second. This is where this person is in their life at this time, and it's keeping them sober. So more power to them. More power to them. Yeah. Now that same person might be giving me shit because I disagree with them. But,
for sure.
That's their issue. But I can't. I cannot be an ideologue myself. I don't want to be like that myself and say, because you can do that. You can be an atheist. I could be a real hard ass. I could say, well, because I don't. I totally am a really hard atheist. I am so sure there's no God. I think it's really silly to believe in God. I think it's almost dangerous to believe in God. I really have these. But I don't necessarily tell people who believe in God about that I have these views. I'm just not that way, but I could be. In AA, some people are. I could say, "Oh, that's bullshit."
Right.
I don't. Well, just let people go take them where they are in their life.
Well, and it's life is a process, right? So the things that I'm ready to deal with now are different things that I wasn't ready to deal with before. So, like you said, that stuff, maybe reading the book all the time in the first couple of years is a good thing. Yeah. Maybe it's not for another person. Yeah. Another quick story: the person also that I gave the chip to this past week, he's a big God believer, but we're still real good friends and stuff. And it was interesting to hear him talk about it. Basically, he had a panic attack in the middle of the night, one night while he was at this nursing center. And he called his wife, and she came to console him. And, he was talking about how God almost killed him 3 times that night. And my translation of that was he was having a panic attack. He was so stricken with anxiety that it felt like he was going to die. Like, he's not at a place in his life where he's just going to die. Like, he's not that elderly of a person necessarily. And then I was talking to his wife about it later too. And then so he retells the story, and then God came into his life that night and told him everything was going to be okay and this and that. Well, then I talked to his wife, and she talked him into taking a Xanax from the nurse that night. And so it's interesting, his perception of it and the way he tells the story was that God came into his life and consoled him, and really he had a Xanax to calm him the fuck down from having a panic attack.
So I wonder if there was a certain Bill W. might have had a similar experience at Towns Hospital.
I wonder. They put him on a bunch of belladonna for 2 straight days, and I wonder. But again, that is that person's right to believe that. Absolutely. I struggle with this with my mom a lot, because my mom will say, she just had surgery the other day too, so we got into talking about all this stuff, and she's always trying to get us to believe, or get me to believe in God and all that stuff. And I'm like, I don't see it work for her. Where I'm going with this is, I'm kind of like you. I don't believe there's a God. I don't know there's not a God. I mean, it's just not the way I talk about it. I don't believe there's a God. And personally, I believe that it's dangerous to believe in a God.
Yeah.
No, I shouldn't say I don't think it's dangerous to believe in a God. I think it can be dangerous to be involved in religion. Like, I think it makes people feel shameful for things that are natural. Yeah. I think it interferes with people's own emotional and intellectual well-being.
Yeah.
But I don't deny that it helps a lot of people. I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
But it's I think it can be dangerous, especially when I look at how religious our culture, our country technically is. And then I look at all the sex issues we have.
Yeah.
Those two things are greatly linked, I think.
They are.
So
yeah, it's interesting being an atheist because just, for me, like you hear me laughing sometimes about people with religious beliefs. I know it's not nice for me to do that, but I'm doing it with you because you understand. I wouldn't be doing that with, with an audience of a bunch of believers in the room or something.
Right.
I'm doing that with you because I'm comfortable, and the people that listen to this podcast are pretty comfortable, but I don't believe in bashing people with religious views. But as an atheist, and I guess I understand I have to be kind of careful because just because I do hold these beliefs, like you say, I think that I don't like religion. I think it's bad for the most part. I think it's dangerous, and I really don't like it, and especially when it's mixed in with politics. And I'm very wary of it, even when it's infused into AA. And sometimes I think it's just downright comical too, and. And so I have to be real careful, because just because I have those opinions doesn't mean that I think that the people who hold these views are bad people or stupid people. I don't believe that at all. And I do respect their experience. I guess I just don't push it on me. That's all I'm saying. Once they do that, that's when I will probably fight back. But if you want to describe your experience in a religious or spiritual terminology, I'm okay with that, and I will interpret that. I'll listen to you talk about your story, and I'll say, yeah, you really had a transformation psychologically or mentally, and I can interpret it that way, and I'm fine. But I'm not going to go out and fight you about because you say it's spiritual, or whatever. But yeah, when I'm just talking to you, I'll laugh about it.
Well, and I probably, I need to keep that in mind. Like, this podcast is not for everybody in AA. It's not, and it's not for anybody necessarily. It's like, take what you like and leave the rest.
Yeah.
And I don't tend to say anything about being an atheist in AA. I mean, I do from time to time, but the only time that I'll really get bothered by something is if somebody says you have to do this or you have to do that. Because, again, I can quote Bill Wilson tons of times saying you don't have to.
Yeah.
So, I have to be careful with that, but I don't know. Yeah. I think I've gone through these experiences myself, and I don't want to be condescending to people who have or haven't, but I know what it was like to be a believer and believe that God exists and all this stuff. And I'm not trying to get anyone to where I'm at, but I can put myself in those people's shoes and see what's going on kind of too.
Right.
And I don't try and correct what I see as being wrong, because it's not necessarily. Right. But there's some things that I see, well, when I was a counselor too, that their belief system is kind of holding them back. Like, again, with my mom and her health issues and all this stuff, it's amazing how she can use her religion to justify. And, it's like talking to an alcoholic or an addict in my office back in the day. Like, there's lots of minimizing, there's lots of justification and rationalization for all the things she wants to do. And she uses her belief to do that. Yeah. Whereas I see it's for her protecting her own selfish, stubborn ways. And that's what I see holding her back in terms of accepting her feelings and growth. So that's where it concerns me as somebody who has clinical experience. But again, just like you can't grab somebody new to AA and say, in my opinion, here's what you have to do. I'm going to push it upon you. You have to do this or you're going to die. And I don't think that works. It doesn't work for me just to question somebody's belief and tell them how fucking dumb it is and how stupid they are. Then all of a sudden they're going to not believe and their life's going to be better. Right. It's a process. It's like coming to terms with the fact you had a bad childhood. Yeah. Some people's idea of making it through that is to idolize their parents and make it sound like nothing was ever wrong until later in life. And you realize it's okay to question that and realize that, yeah, they could have done some things different. And here's, like, right now, we've got a 10-month-old. So it's like, I'm at a period in my life where I question the things my parents did because I'm trying to clarify what I want to be as a parent.
Right.
And that's a healthy thing. Now, earlier in my life, it was maybe easier for me to ignore those things. And it was maybe psychologically beneficial to ignore those things. But it's been my experience that some of the ways we can ignore these things by staying fundamental about AA, they bubble to the surface eventually and they need dealt with. But I've seen 30, 35, 40-year sober people who just don't seem to have dealt with the emotional issues that they need to deal with in order to truly be free and grow as a person and let go of some anger and fear and resentment. And so I like to think that's where my concern comes from on this level. But again, everybody's walk is their own, and they've got to take their own path as they see fit and do what works for them. So I need to respect that, just like I would hope they respect my right to have my own walk in my non-belief.
Right. I do too. Exactly how I feel. And like I say, I'm appropriate with whoever I'm speaking with. So just for people out there listening to the podcast, just because I'm laughing and making fun of the belief doesn't mean that I'm that insensitive, and I don't really do that all the time.
Well, it's a testament to growth too. That's something that, for me at least, I held so dearly, and I definitely believe that now I can laugh at it and make fun of it because I have more understanding of my past and where it was coming from. And for all I know, I may end up being religious someday in my life again. I really don't think so, but I'm not fighting that. I've ceased fighting anything and everything, John. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. I hate that line sometimes.
Yeah. Well, this has been a very interesting conversation, as always. I'm so glad that we talked. It's good to get back and doing the podcast again. I don't really have anybody lined up for the next week or so. I've got some things I need to do. Like I was telling you, I feel sorry for Sarah because I told her I was going to read her book and have her on the podcast. I still haven't read her book. I need to take some time to sit down and read the book. So I'm going to try to do that this weekend, and maybe I can reach out to her real soon.
She's a good person.
And she's a really great writer. And from what I've read of the book so far, it was really good. So I have to start over again, though. Terrible with books.
I wanted to ask too, what was the buzz like that you got from Megan's article? I know we talked a little bit about it. I shared it with a lot of people, and I had one of my more liberal, maybe I said this on the last podcast, but I had one of my more liberal friends in AA. And his first response to me was, and this was just after we got done talking about dogmatism, he said, she shared in there about having difficulties and emotional difficulties with her mom. And I got to thinking maybe she wasn't a real alcoholic. And I just looked at him and I go, dude, that's just what we were talking about. Like, it's like to dismiss anything outside of what you find to be a real alcoholic or not. And then it's like dismissing anything she found that didn't work for her in AA. Well, that's just because you weren't a real alcoholic. I got to give him credit because immediately he turned around. He's like, you're right. I did just do that. You're right. Sorry.
Well, it was one of our more popular articles. And, we've actually posted things on AA Beyond Belief before that deal with people who leave AA. First of all, Megan's story. Then we had a person, Steve Berger, who left and went to Smart Recovery. He wrote a story about leaving AA, plus we had him on a podcast. And then John Stewart, of course, we had him on a podcast about leaving AA and staying sober. So we've had stories of people on AA Beyond Belief who were alcoholics and decided that AA was not for them. And I think those are entirely appropriate to have on our site. And I tell you what, man, I kind of think the Grapevine should publish a story like that once in a while. I think it's good for people in AA to read those things and understand that, first of all, it's not for everybody.
Right.
And second of all, we might be doing things that are driving people away. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that Megan wrote in her article that made me stop and think about how I behave.
Yes.
What behaviors do I undertake that are driving people away, perhaps, or have undertook in my life? And and I just loved her story. I thought it was really good because she wrote it from her own personal experience, which is what we generally do in AA and on our site. And I related with her about her story with her mother because I also had a mother who suffered from mental illness. So I related with her on that. I was kind of dealing with all of these issues when I was in my 20s, and I think she's fairly young. So I could really connect with her and relate to her in a lot of different ways. And when I hear someone who says that they've left AA, and I'm okay with, cool, of course, go, whatever. But I thought it was a good article. It's one of those things you want to read it a couple of different times, probably.
Yes.
But it was one of our more popular articles. I don't think we got too many negative feedback. I think there was maybe some people have left us. They didn't like maybe that being anti-AA, but we're not anti-AA. I don't think she is. It's just like, God damn, why do we have to be like in camps?
Right. Yeah.
So
it's very alcoholic thinking, actually, to think that way. I mean, if you believe in those such terms, I mean, it's like, put everybody in a camp so I can define them. And I don't know.
Like we're the AA camp, and how dare you put somebody's story on there who doesn't like us or doesn't believe in AA or whatever. And I think it was great. She's an alcoholic, or however she wants to describe herself. She's someone who's had to deal with, substance abuse issues, and she has found a way that she can help others still without being part of AA. And I think that's cool. So, I used to. Great.
I had a sponsee who used to always address himself as somebody who no longer drinks, and then there's some other guy in the meeting would be like, "Bullshit, you're an alcoholic." And I said, "Dude, you call yourself whatever you want. Some people don't find value in continuing to call themselves an alcoholic. That's okay. It's not necessarily the first sign of a problem."
Yeah, we get that in meetings too, and that's another thing that we in AA we have this custom, I guess, of introducing ourselves. I'm so and so. I'm an alcoholic, and sometimes a few of us in our meeting have gotten together outside the meeting. We've talked. I wonder how productive that really is to put that label on ourselves when newcomers see that. Why it's really not necessary. We just do it out of habit.
Right.
But when we do have a newcomer, it's not comfortable with that. We say you don't really have to introduce yourself in any particular way.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've kind of off the subject there.
But sorry, I've kind of dragged this on probably too long. But Megan's article was so well written, and it spoke to me a great deal. And it's like I don't see what she wrote and said, "Well, fucking, I'm leaving AA too." No. That's not. I mean, she just chooses not to go anymore because it's not healthy for her. I don't go as often as I used to because I feel like I found a level that's fitting for me. I go to coffee with friends more and talk to the people that I sponsor, and
she wrote a lot of stuff there that people need to think about, because AA, I mean, we're just human beings. We're a collective group of human beings, and when you get groups of human beings together, you have this group behavior, and there is a certain amount of shaming that goes on. I think unintentionally, maybe sometimes intentionally, depends on the person. There's just a lot of things that we need to be aware of in Alcoholics Anonymous, of our behaviors, and making sure that we're respectful of people from wherever they're coming in their lives, and not be so pushy about crap, and let people just say. I thought it was good, and I like her. I mean, I don't know her
she's
personally,
awesome.
but I follow her on Facebook, and I like her a lot, and I like the way she writes, and I hope she writes for us again sometime.
Yeah, she's great. Love her.
Well, Ben, you have a nice weekend. I'll get this thing edited and posted for this Wednesday.
Sounds great, John.
Yeah, been good talking to you.
Yeah, good talking to you too.
All right, have a good day.
All right.
Well, that's it for another episode of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back soon enough with another episode for your listening pleasure. Until then, don't drink, go to meetings, and help others.